You're watching a critique of The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening remake. This video will be solely focused on the remake itself and not on any of the base game's design. If you're new to the channel, I already have a comprehensive look at the DX port for Game Boy Color, where I break down the story, dungeon, and overworld design in greater detail. Nothing has changed since that initial video, or at least nothing noteworthy, and seeing as this is quite a faithful remake, I don't see any point in retreading old ground. When the remake was announced, I wasn't exactly thrilled. In a market already flooded with remakes, what does a one-to-one recreation of Link's Awakening really have to offer? Shinier visuals, different instruments, gameplay tweaks? Certainly it's novel to glimpse it under a new light, but I guess another question is, was there anything so unapproachable about the original that warranted a ground-up $60 remake 20 years after the fact? Especially when that original is on the 3DS for a couple bucks? I'd like to answer those questions throughout the video, because the answers are, as usual, not exactly clear-cut. Let's look at all of the changes made to the original, both large and small, so we can come to a more complete understanding of what this remake offers that the original might not. Link's Awakening is one of my favorite Zelda games, though I wouldn't say I have nostalgia for it. My first brush with it was in December of last year, and I fell in love with it on that first playthrough. Despite some annoying moments, frequent pausing, and intrusive text boxes, I was captured by the world, characters, and that cruel punchline of an ending. The remake doesn't really change a lot about the original on a structural level. You still visit all the same dungeons, their layout is the same, every quest, overworld location, and character are almost identical. What the remake actually does is add on top of that base. There are now 50 secret seashells instead of 26, 32 heart pieces as opposed to 12, and a new dungeon builder side mode instead of the picture house. Some chests in dungeons and in the overworld have been changed to accommodate the increase. This applies to the fishing minigame and the trendy game, which now has figurines to collect and store in the houses of Mabe Village. As such, there are new rewards in the Seashell House on top of what was in the original. So, while most every chest, cave, and secret room have the same layout, the rewards you find may be altered slightly. While I do think this was a nice gesture, it also starts to make the world feel a little overcrowded. One of my favorite aspects of the original was the relatively low amount of secrets to find, which not only amplified their importance, but kept up with the quicker pace of the relatively small island of Koholint. I generally prefer when Zelda games have less to find, since it makes each secret more memorable, and often makes each upgrade feel more substantial. While I don't necessarily have a problem with more heart pieces, adding more seashells was a bit overkill. Heart pieces can be rewards for practically anything, and the new ones are typically used to better flesh out the already existing secret areas or minigames, which I definitely approve of. What were silly distractions in the original are given a bit more weight, and incentivize you to visit Mabe Village more often. Collecting figurines from the trendy game is especially rewarding, since you can't get them all at once. You unlock more after each dungeon, which pushes you to come back periodically instead of all at once. Connecting with the island and its people helps to strengthen that cruel ending. However, secret seashells were a bit different. You would often find them in set blades of grass or underground next to a distinct pattern. While many of the new seashells fall in line with that idea, a few of them are slightly puzzling. One of them has you playing the Ballad of the Windfish next to the water where the Sleeping Walrus was. And I mean one tile away from that water, because even if you think to use it 2 tiles away, it won't trigger. Using the Pegasus boots on trees in the original was usually obvious, since trees that dropped items were always on their own. Not every one of those trees had a secret seashell, but you usually knew when you could run into them with the boots. In the remake, there will sometimes be trees in a set that have different collision. One tree will shake and drop an item, while the others will have no reaction, and you'll just bump into them like you would any other wall. You almost need to have the seashell tuning fork or you won't even think to run into some of these trees. This wasn't a problem in the original, because it was much easier to tell which trees were part of the background and which weren't. There's also the question of why there needed to be almost double the amount in the first place. Often it's just the same idea repeated again somewhere else, and while it does fill out gaps in the world, it usually just means double the backtracking. The warp points in the original were fine, since you didn't strictly need to keep combing over the map again and again. You only needed 20 seashells to get the sword upgrade, 3 of which were given to you by the seashell house itself. Again, this made each seashell location more memorable, and gave you a wider margin for error since there are 6 seashells you can miss while getting the upgrade. All the remake does is add even more, pushing the requirement up to 40. While that doesn't sound bad on paper, all it really does is add unnecessary filler, especially in the case of the overworld seashells. Plus, the addition of the tuning fork makes it feel like more of a task than a fun side objective, and ruins their location for players who found their obscurity fun in the first place. Finding seashells in the original was a fun side objective I could tackle at my own pace, while in the remake, it feels like another huge task that I need to complete once I have enough for the tuning fork and can run around for a few hours digging. This all comes to a head with the Dungeon Builder side attraction. To say it's a dungeon builder would probably be giving it too much credit. It's yet another side mode added onto the main game, and is so tacked on that it genuinely hurts me. See, the idea of adding a dungeon builder to a remake of Link's Awakening is already a bit of an absurd idea, but if it was its own dedicated side mode, I'd at least understand it more. It's like a backdoor pilot for an official Zelda maker later down the line, or at least I hope that's what it was trying to be. It would have been the same as including 4 swords in the GBA port of A Link to the Past, a dedicated side mode you select from the title screen. Not only is this mode baked into the main game, replacing many of the chests and minigame rewards with chamber stones, it is woefully underdeveloped. You can only use tiles from dungeons that you've completed, plus any additional tiles that you collect from chests or minigames. Already these dungeons are limited in the sense that you can only really play around with the pre-made rooms the game selects for you. Since the dungeons in this game are some of the best in the series and often require you to consider their entire layout, you'll often be uncomfortably familiar with them. This makes the collage of rooms you explore come across as repetitive. It takes a very, very long time to actually get varied use out of the Dungeon Maker, and you'll have to slog through Dampé's pre-made challenges first. The challenges usually see you burdened with a few requirements, like chest or stair tiles. It sounds fun, but when you realize you can take a bunch of non-threatening tiles and string together a series of filler rooms, it quickly becomes repetitive. The 3-heart challenge is quickly invalidated by the player's ability to string together the shortest amount of rooms to the boss and add a bunch of filler rooms afterward that the player never even needs to visit. The way it works, no matter what, is that the last chest a player finds will contain the Nightmare Key. You quickly realize that as long as you string together a bunch of rooms with no chests in them, you can ignore half the dungeon you've built. After that, you just fight the anglerfish, the easiest boss in the game, and a 3-heart run becomes a snooze fest. It's the same with a swordless run, it's the same with any challenge Dampé throws your way. It tries its damnedest to force the player into creating an elaborate set of difficult rooms, but the only way it can truly do that is by placing those difficult rooms itself, and forcing the player to go through them for a chest. Unfortunately, these restrictive and suffocating layouts are bound to these unique challenges. Sure, you can arrange a 3-heart run if you want, but it will always be in this bottle layout. You can't do anything more than this, even if you wanted to. Now, this would theoretically be fine if I could make creative dungeons for these challenges. Sure, you can kinda cheese them, but I did actually try creating complex dungeons at first. I mean, if you've been around the channel for a while, you would know that I have a particular taste in dungeon design that I'd love to take to a ridiculous extreme. While I did try to make some great dungeons, I ran into a host of frustrating roadblocks that just exhausted me after a while. You are bound by the game itself to a set of starting rooms that can only be placed in certain blocks, and boss rooms that can only be entered from the bottom. You can only have one major boss outside of collectible chambers, you have no direct control over where your stairways will connect, you have no control over what any of the chests will contain, how many chests will be in a room, how many exits are in a room, how many enemies are in a room, what obstacles will be in that room. You simply can't place checkpoints at all, and on and on and on. This means that you are severely limited in how you're able to flex your creative muscles. I really wanted to make a dungeon similar to Hyrule Castle in Twilight Princess, where building up a surplus of keys could unlock an extra room with a bunch of useful items before the boss. Imagine creating something like that here, where careless key usage could mean losing out on that secret room. You could pack a bunch of useful items in there that would make the boss easier, provided you were able to handicap the player by limiting the amount of items they start with. Or better yet, imagine if you could make a dungeon similar to that section in Skyward Sword where all of your items are stolen. Imagine creating this huge dungeon with weird twists and turns, one where you have to find every single dungeon item in the game to bypass every obstacle and make it to the boss. The way it is now, absolutely none of your dungeons can elicit that same feeling, since you have to go into them with your current toolset. So many ideas that will never come to fruition in this undercooked waste of time. There's no online integration, meaning that you're creating dungeons to clear yourself, limiting the types of challenges you can create. You'll likely only want to make action-focused combat challenges for yourself, since those will test your mettle no matter what. Creating your own puzzling layout lacks the same bite as it would playing one, since you'll already know how to clear it. At that point, it's just a bunch of busy work. You really need to be able to play other levels. That is quite literally the only reason Mario Maker even functions the way it does. Without the ability to play other people's levels, or to have other people play your levels, it would be a fundamental and critical failure. It's why I wish this was a side mode. It would still be severely limited, and I likely wouldn't touch it all that much, but at least then it wouldn't interfere with the main game. At least then it wouldn't hide heart pieces behind mundane dungeon arrangements. At least then it wouldn't replace previously useful rewards with underwhelming chamber stones. At least then I wouldn't have to play the entire game just to get the most use out of it. Really, if you want something like this in the main game, it just needs to be built like challenges in previous Zeldas. Have a pre-built dungeon for the 3-heart challenge. Have a pre-built boss rush. Have a pre-built swordless challenge. That would be a lot more satisfying all in all, since the player would be confronted with new challenges worthy of the rewards that accompany them. You could still use rooms from the dungeons, it would still work. The problem for player creation is that they're too limited, but that's not a problem if the dungeons are pre-built. At that point, it would just feel like a series of challenge rooms, and that could have been fun in its own right. There have been other changes that affect the game in an adverse way. Movement both looks and feels way worse than it did in the original. While the original did still have 8-directional movement, Link could only attack in 4 directions. While this sounds awful, it worked surprisingly well. You could sort of glide around the battlefield, confident in where your attacks would strike or where an enemy would strike you. In the remake, you're locked to 8 directions at all times. You snap quite awkwardly between those directions, and it can make combat extremely frustrating. These diagonals only serve to make combat more confusing. Holding up your shield and moving can often accidentally force your shield into a different position and leave you open to attack. Ranged attacks also suffer because of this, since you have 4 whole new directions to contend with. Sometimes you might want to shoot an arrow to your right, but you'll accidentally shoot it at a diagonal. It happens so often that it can make certain encounters way more frustrating than they really need to be. This wouldn't be a problem if they just let Link knock an arrow and aim before firing, but the arrow still fires off instantly at the press of a single button. If they weren't going to implement that 4-directional diagonal glide of the original, they really should have just added free analog movement. While the design of the game is clearly on a tile grid, that also didn't stop A Link Between Worlds from having a full range. Honestly, Link's Awakening in particular probably could have used smoother controls considering there's actual platforming involved. It feels like there's a lot less leeway with the bottomless pits than before, where you could effortlessly clear these gaps in the original and often get yourself out of a bad situation by jumping at the very edge of a tile. The remake seems to have restricted this a great deal. This makes platforming less fun to actually execute, especially in cases where you could skillfully avoid hookshot usage to nab a few secrets. Speaking of the hookshot, its added usage in the River Rapids minigame kinda infuriates me. There I was, trying for literal hours to get into this left section for the heart piece, to reach the secret areas. I just couldn't do it. In the original, you simply picked a path of currents and let them whisk you away somewhere. Sure, it was a bit trial and error, but it was simple fun. It's kinda like using a pachinko machine. In the remake, you actually can't access certain areas until you have the hookshot, which just feels like a slap in the face to longtime fans. There is literally nothing that would indicate you need a hookshot, not even a warning. Due to how unwieldy the currents already feel and how arbitrarily you end up where you do, you'd be forgiven for assuming you just have to brute force it and hope you're lucky. Sometimes I'd make it in the top secret area, and sometimes I wouldn't, despite performing the same inputs each time. Sometimes I'd end up in a secret area by pure chance, sometimes I wouldn't. There are no rules, it's a madhouse, one that ultimately just needs a hookshot so you can cheese the entire race. What was wrong with the original version of this minigame that it needed to be changed in this way? A lot of these additions end up making me ask that question, why is this here? It sucks because everything else that's been added genuinely improves the base game. There are no more screen transitions on the overworld, which makes exploring it feel more seamless. I still think this art style would have worked better in a new Zelda game that could take better advantage of it, but it still works wonders for Link's Awakening. It's a cute, kinda wacky game, with a cute, kinda wacky art style. The Pegasus Boots, Power Bracelet, Sword, and Shield are no longer equipable items. This leads to far less frequent item switching. You no longer have to sit through that text box for simply walking into a rock without a Power Bracelet. You can place markers on the map, which makes backtracking a lot easier. Your map generally just gives you a lot more useful information than it used to, especially in dungeons. Some bosses have been tweaked so that they're more challenging, like Facade, whose face will now appear in different sections of the room and will spawn holes far more aggressively. Bombable walls, while sometimes telegraphed too obviously, will oftentimes blend in with the new lighting and camera in a way that makes them genuinely fun to find. You actually need to scan your environment while looking at your map for clues to spot bombable walls. It fixes that paradox of the original, where no indication would be too cryptic, but any actual indication was too obvious. Hero mode is selectable from the start, which is much appreciated and feels noticeably more difficult. I actually felt like I needed the blue mail, whereas in the original I'd almost always select the red mail for ridiculous damage output. Some of my deaths were due to Link's slower movement speed, or should I say the enemy's increased movement speed. It's actually been documented that Link moves about the same speed, so it isn't true to say that he moves slower. However, I think the reason it can sometimes feel that way is because enemies move and attack way faster than before. Bombs instantly explode when they touch the ground, for instance. One of the mini-bosses, who will frequently throw bombs, is incredibly hard now just because he's so much more aggressive. It sometimes feels impossible to dodge his bombs and grabs. Other than these quirks though, it was a refreshingly challenging way to revisit the game. I love how bullshit the trendy game is. Crane games in real life kinda suck, and for a silly side mode, this emulates that feeling even more realistically. I adore logging onto Twitter and watching just how many weird things can happen to people. Since it only costs 10 rupees, it's really hard to stay mad at this thing. Certain cutscenes are enhanced by the rehauled visual design, adding more detail to people's homes and expressions than ever before. It does help connect you with everyone on a far deeper level, and adds more charm than was present even in the original. Then again, for everything cool this remake adds, there's something else that feels out of place. While some of the songs have been remade exceptionally well, especially the arresting redux of the Face Shrine dungeon theme. Other songs have not survived the transition as gracefully. Angler's Tunnel was not exactly a great song in the original, but it's made even worse in the remake. It mixes new instruments with old instruments in perhaps the strangest and most discordant way imaginable. Moments like Marin following you to the animal village are ruined by compositions that feel like they came out of a modern Yoshi game because they were done on a recorder. It's a mixed bag of musical renditions for a game that already had a fine enough soundtrack to begin with. If it just had an original soundtrack option, none of this would even be that much of a problem. For as beautiful as the game's visuals are, the frame rate is horrendous, dropping at seemingly random intervals at a consistent rate. It really distracts from the visual splendor when it feels so choppy to play. That's kinda the theme of the video and this remake. For everything it adds, it removes something else. Item management is less cumbersome, but movement makes combat more cumbersome. Secrets are still fun to collect, but there are even more of them for seemingly no reason. Some side modes have been better fleshed out, while others feel like an afterthought. Some of the new secrets are rewarding, but some have been rendered obsolete by chamber stones. The visuals are gorgeous, and yet the soundtrack is underwhelming. It's still Link's Awakening, and that's still fun and exciting and beautiful, but almost nothing they added really needed to be there. It screws with the pacing of an intentionally smaller scale Zelda, and makes for a remake that, as is frustratingly the case most of the time, has both meaningful and useless fixes to that core, which means there are now two versions of the game, each with strengths and weaknesses, and you will always need to make that painful decision about which version to play. That decision is made exceptionally worse as the original is nowhere to be seen on the Nintendo Switch, meaning if you want to play Link's Awakening on Nintendo's most current hardware, you have to buy this remake. They have given many people no other choice than to experience this flawed remake over the original. Many people are calling for Nintendo to remake the Oracle games in a similar style, but I'm wondering what's going to happen to those originals if they're remade. What is going to be added to them? What's going to screw with that original design? What new content is going to mutilate the brilliance of those games? Do we really need more? Weren't they fine as they were? Is it worth spending time on these projects, charging $60 for them, dedicating an entire team of people to them? I wonder, in an alternate universe, what we could have gotten instead. Could we have gotten an original game to stick in our hearts and minds forever? Or would we be stuck in a safe, never-ending dream of the glory days?